Hi, I'm Deboki and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I'm going to be talking about a book that I was really excited for until I wasn't. So this video is going to be more of a discussion about nonfiction and nonfiction publishing in general. But I wanted to start by talking about this book in particular because I think it's both a timely and useful starting point. In my quest to read more new books this year, one of the books I was really excited for and had on my TBR was Merchants of Truth by Jill Abramson. Abramson is a journalist who's probably best known for her work at the New York Times, where she was the first woman executive editor until she was fired from her job in 2014. She now, according to her Twitter bio, is a creative writing professor at Harvard. Her book, Merchants of Truth, The Business of News and the Fight for Facts, was published in February 2019 by Simon & Schuster. In Merchants of Truth, Abramson tracks the stories of 4 media companies, her own previous employer, the New York Times, The Washington Post, BuzzFeed, and Vice. As you might expect from those choices, Abramson uses both legacy and newer media organizations as sort of launching points to discuss the changing business of journalism. Last year I read Tina Brown's The Vanity Fair Diaries, and I really enjoyed the insider perspective it gave on how magazines are assembled and kind of the politics and inside, machinery that drives all of that. So I was really excited for this book because I wanted to learn more about how the business of media shapes what we as consumers actually end up reading and watching and listening to. But in the months leading up to the publication of Merchants of Truth, people started getting their hands on galley copies and they noticed a few problems. On Twitter, some of the Vice reporters who were interviewed for the book noted a range of issues with Abramson's descriptions of their backgrounds, their qualifications, journalistic decisions, and even their appearance. Not just, problems in terms of like contentious or problematic, but issues in terms of factually incorrect. Some of these reporters have stated that while they were interviewed by Abramson for the book, she didn't record their conversations and they were never contacted for any fact-checking. I haven't read the book, so I'm basing what I'm about to say on what other people have said about it, either like through excerpts that they've posted on Twitter or like summaries that they've given. So take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But it seems like Abramson's descriptions and portrayals of the Vice reporters, the descriptions of the work that they do, are geared towards arguing that they display less rigor and qualification compared to reporters at more established institutions. And some of the Twitter threads documenting these inaccuracies have since been removed. If you want to see more specifics, I'll link to a few articles that describe them, as well as some Twitter threads that give some more details. And also some of these mistakes have since been corrected between that galley copy and the final printing of the book, but other inaccuracies still apparently remain. On top of that, there have been several accusations of plagiarism that Abramson has claimed are merely issues of her not properly treating things as quotations. Abramson is not the first nonfiction writer to get called out for factual errors. I'm sure a lot of us remember James Frey and his memoir. Another more recent example might be Sally Kohn misquoting Aminatou Sow in The Opposite of Hate. But Abramson, like I said, is just kind of like a timely starting point for the discussion in this video. Both Abramson's plagiarism and fact-checking issues are apparently somewhat connected in that for the most part, publishing companies put the onus of making sure a work is both factually correct and not plagiarized on the author. According to one Vox article, one of the standard parts of any book contract is the warranty and indemnity clause. By signing onto that clause, an author is guaranteeing that their book is their own original project, not plagiarism, that it doesn't infringe on anyone else's rights, and if the book is nonfiction, that its facts are accurate. And if it turns out that any of these claims are untrue, the liability is all on the author. They're the ones who pay up if someone decides to sue. A few publishing houses do offer their own in-house fact-checking services apparently, but for the most part, nonfiction authors who want to get their work fact-checked have to pay for it themselves. And that can get quite expensive. Given the cost, it's understandable that many authors would not be able to afford that and would decide to forego it overall, though you'd hope someone like Abramson, who reportedly had a $1 million advance on her book, would have considered doing it. Side note, if you haven't yet, I highly recommend reading the New Yorker article about Daniel Radcliffe's day spent fact-checking for the magazine. The article is funny and a great read, and it gives a sense for how much work and detail can go into fact-checking. I'll link to it below. There's kind of a weird circular logic that I'm sure a lot of us attach to books and to nonfiction in particular. And I've seen it noted in quite a few articles about this subject. When an author is published, we assume that they must be legit because only legit people get published. Books in particular have this sort of patina of legitimacy. Like, you see a bunch of information stapled together into a book and wrapped up in the right cover, and it seems more valid than, like, you know, whatever Google can tell you. And yet books are apparently sometimes the most unreliable sources, likely because they're often published without fact-checking. In a 2018 article in The Guardian, Aaron Biba, a science writer and former fact-checker, said, quote, "When I was a fact-checker, I rarely used books as a source because they were often inaccurate and contained errors." And this is a huge challenge. A lot of us, you know, we read nonfiction specifically because we want to get out of our area of expertise, but that makes it difficult for us to figure out what is fact and what is not. My area of expertise is one very, very specific niche of molecular biology, and so if I were reading a book in that general subject area, it would be very easy for me to do a quick fact check or kind of quickly parse through what I think is right or wrong, or what I kind of want to do some more reading on to verify. But for example, a few months ago, I read Robert K. Massie's biography of Catherine the Great, and I thought it was great. I thought it was super interesting, but I'm also not a historian, and I don't understand Russian history enough to be able to verify everything that's in that book. So I'm putting a lot of trust in him and that he's representing his sources accurately, because I sure as hell don't know. And further complicating all of this is the fact that nonfiction books aren't just basic restatements of facts. They're often statements of interpretation. That's true across pretty much all categories of nonfiction: science, history, biography, and so on. Facts are objective, but the choices an author makes when presenting them are not. Everything from the sources they choose to draw upon, the way they choose to frame their ideas, the conclusions they push the reader to draw, those affect how we as a reader are understanding the facts. Furthermore, as a reader, I'm not coming to these books as an objective interpreter. I have my own biases and experiences and intentions that shape what I take in from the book. That very issue of interpretation is what makes the accuracy of the facts so vital. Most of us haven't worked at a major media company, so when former New York Times executive editor and Harvard professor Jill Abramson is writing her book to make an argument about the business of news and media, we're trusting that the basic facts she's building on are accurate. But it seems to me like we're also putting some trust in the publishers themselves. After all, they are what separates a book from a Twitter thread or a Wikipedia entry or, you know, someone talking into their camera and just posting it on YouTube. So I'm not really sure why the liability of fact-checking is really falling entirely on the author, when in some ways it's the publisher's name and the sense of their involvement that I'm also presumably paying for. In that article from The Guardian, one editor says that the industry just doesn't have the time or money for a full fact check on every book. Their responsibilities are, quote, copy editing, proofreading, and legal services. I don't know enough to argue with that. I mean, very inelegantly, all I can say is that it seems kind of like a cop-out. In a 2014 article from The Atlantic, journalist Scott Rosenberg was quoted saying about publishing houses, "They don't pay a price when the book is exposed. No one looks at the publishing house's name on the book they bought 4 years ago when Newsweek exposes it as inaccurate and says, 'I'll never buy a book published by them again.' So why should the publisher care?" And he's right. Publishing houses can avoid the fact-checking question, so they do. I'm annoyed that Simon & Schuster were willing to publish Merchants of Truth without checking its facts. But there's no reason for me to single them out when this seems like the norm across the industry. The article from The Atlantic closes with a quote from Mac McClellan, a fact-checker and writer. "Maybe there should be a warning, like on a pack of cigarettes. This book has not been fact-checked at all." Because when I realized that basically everything I had read until that point had not been verified, I felt a little bit lied to. I love that quote. And I'm probably going to think about it every time I check out a new nonfiction book, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to start reading nonfiction books. Books are still a great way to combine a lot of information into a cohesive narrative. For example, I've been obsessively following the Theranos saga while it was ongoing and happening, but when John Carreyrou published Bad Blood, I still read it because I knew that it was going to help kind of congeal everything that I had been reading up until that point with a lot of details that might not have been relevant at the time the news was first unfolding. And by reading the book, all of those different elements were put together into a more cohesive and impactful story that you don't get just by, following the story as it happens in news articles and magazines. So this is a discussion video, but I think really what I'm trying to get at is just kind of like a general sense of aimless angst, I feel. As someone who likes reading nonfiction and even reviews and recommends it to people, like how do I read a book whose contents I'm probably gonna like insufferably regurgitate to like anyone I meet in like, I don't know, like a responsible kind of way? And I don't have an answer for that. That's why I kind of want to put this out here in this discussion video because that's what BookTube is great for. So if you have any thoughts about this, please let me know down below in the comments and we can talk this out about how to learn stuff from books that we don't know, like are entirely right or wrong or what. I've included links to all of the articles that I've quoted, as well as some supplemental information. So feel free to, read those, maybe fact check me, argue with me, agree with me, whatever it is. Let's talk about it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and yeah, bye.